Turn your mind on and your TV off. It's time to hear the real truth behind what's really going on. Join Tia Severino, an advocate for truth, freedom, and spiritual growth, as she explores the real story behind what we are made to believe on her show, The People's Truth. In the next hour, you'll be exposed to shocking revelations, to lies you have believed in all your life. Together with her guests, she will unravel the facts behind the current events, health, wellness, faith, justice, and more. As Orwell said, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Join the conversation, leave a comment, or call in live 678-495-4345. Don't forget to like, share, and help spread the great message out. And now, here's Tia Severino.
Hello, and welcome to The People's Truth. I'm your host, Tia Severino, and in this show, we dig deep into the issues that are really affecting our world. Today, I'm really excited to bring you a new friend of someone that I just recently got to connect with on a more personal level, as she was one of the gold sponsors, or her company was one of the gold sponsors at the Next Steps conference that took place June 3rd and 4th this year. So earlier this month. And I was just really kind of struck by this young lady. She's just got so much great energy. So let me tell you about her. Her name is Louise Milleman. I think I'm pronouncing her name right. She's going to correct me if I'm wrong. She's an earth-loving, tree-hugging, unschooling, freedom-fighting, world-traveling citizen of the universe who went from being a full-time nomad, traveling this big, beautiful globe for the last 5 years, to building an off-grid permaculture paradise of a homestead with her husband and her 2 little girls. In addition to inspiring others to live off the land, grow their own food, build with alternative building materials, protect and provide for themselves, she enjoys helping people find natural and proactive ways of taking care of themselves. She also loves to share about one of the missing pieces in people's health journey, living structured water. In fact, she leads a global team of hundreds of water-loving, conscious entrepreneurs, empowering and leading them to build their very own life of ultimate freedom. So without further ado, Louise, please tell me the correct pronunciation of your name. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Milleman is correct. I think you said Milleman. That's just...
I think I said Milleman. Well, we've got it now. Milleman. Okay. Well, wonderful. We're so glad that you're here. You have such great energy. Just this little kind of, boho, like the nomad. Now that I'm hearing about your backstory, it makes total sense. It makes complete sense to me. So tell the folks who are watching a little bit about who you are and kind of like how you kind of the winding journey that brought you to the place that you are at right now.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. This is so fun. I love that the opportunity to come on here. And I would love to talk a little bit about the past and kind of what led me here. And so I love that in the bio, it talks about my traveling experience, because it really was like about 10 years ago or so, I became a mother. And, when we all become moms, we start thinking about life differently. We start thinking about things differently. And I actually have a father who was diagnosed with an illness, a terminal illness is what they said, Parkinson's disease. When he was really young. He was 34 years old when he was diagnosed, and he died when he was 51. So he lived with 17 years of this illness. And I became a mother in the process when he was still alive. And I started looking at all the things that they were doing, like the medical system. And I started feeling like this just wasn't right? There was like this feeling that I just knew something was like wrong with like what was happening to my father. And at some point it was almost like too far gone, And so I looked around at like what I could do to change. And I became an activist. I started fighting against GMOs and Monsanto. And I learned about I went down the path of like the rabbit hole of like vaccines. And my dad was in the Navy. So he had all the vaccines under the sun, and I just started researching all of these things. Right. And so I went on this like activism journey. And then like when my dad finally passed, it was when my second daughter was born. She was only a few weeks old. And that's when I made this decision that we were going to live life. Like, I was like, we only have one life. Like I watched my dad, like his life was basically robbed from me or from him. Sorry. And
you.
So I decided and me. Yeah, totally. And me. And so many people. Right, exactly. And so we kind of I just made this decision at that point. I was like, I'm not going to let, like, while I'm still young and while I have a life and while I can still move my body, because like what happened with his illness is he was unable, like his mind was there, but his body like wasn't able to do anything anymore, to the point where he couldn't walk, he couldn't talk, he couldn't swallow, he was bedridden for the last 5 years of his life completely, and I was like, while I can move my legs, while I can move my mouth, I'm going to be a voice, while I can move my legs, I'm going to walk, while I can travel the globe, I'm going to travel. And so when my dad died at that point, which is really, really strange to say sometimes, but it was like the most bittersweet moment of my life. Like I was so happy that he was finally gone because he suffered for so many years. But at the same time, of course, I was like sad because I didn't want to lose my dad. You know what I mean?
Right.
But ultimately, I lost my dad years before he took his last breath. I mean, he was physically gone like long before that, and he was ready to go. So it was like, whoo, he's gone. And now I felt like I could finally like go out and live our life. And so that's kind of what we decided to do. That's why we started traveling full time. Like we literally sold everything that we owned. We had a house in California. We're like, get rid of it, get rid of all the stuff we have. We literally packed up everything we owned into this one little container that we could carry around with us. And we started traveling. I also had gotten so sick and tired of the activist life because I felt like I was getting burnt out. I felt like I was doing so much work to try to fight all this like tyrannical stuff that was happening in the world. And I just felt like I was getting nowhere. And so I was like, what can I really do? Like, what's the biggest difference I can make if I didn't feel like the difference I was trying to make was really working? And so I thought to myself, the biggest form of activism I could possibly do was just raise my children to be free thinkers in the world and teach them about so many different things in such a, I guess you could say, different way than like a traditional way, So we kind of picked up our kids and we started world schooling is what we call it. And there's like a term for that where people literally like take their kids and they just travel the world and they learn through experience and they learn through travel and education. And you don't really necessarily have to travel like internationally or whatever to technically do world school. I mean, really, it's just like schooling with the world around you. But like we took it to that level where we're like, we want to go. I thought of all the places my dad would have wanted to go. And I was like, man, and I had his little bag of ashes and I took it with me every single place we went. And I released it in like India and Cuba and Thailand and Cambodia, like all the places we went. I would take little pieces of his ashes and I would spread them everywhere. We went to this active volcano in Nicaragua and I blew his ashes like into the volcano. Like, so I thought like I was taking my dad with me, like when I went, but so it was kind of like we were doing it for that purpose, but also like the kids were learning experiences through cultures and stuff like that. And then on all of our travels, like we didn't have a home base. So when we were stateside, we lived in a camper and then we would, come back stateside for like a month or two. Then we'd go off in Asia for 4 months and we'd come back and we'd stay back stateside for 2 months, 3 months, however long. We didn't really plan too much. We just kind of like went with the flow. Right. But then we were actually traveling when all of the COVID stuff went down. And I remember we actually flew into Beijing, China. It was December 25th, 2019. And the first case, I guess, of COVID was heard about in like the end of November in China. And so when we were booking our flights, like I had to click through all of these like agreements that we were like flying into this country that had this like coronavirus COVID thing. So I like had all these pop-ups and I'm all, reading it quickly. And I'm like, agree, like whatever. And we flew into Beijing and like, I didn't think anything of it at the time because I just thought like we got in like at 6 o'clock in the morning and I thought, well, maybe it's just like a really dead time at the airport, but there was like nobody at the airport. It was like super weird. And I have a video of my daughter actually, and I'm saying, hey, Hurley, how do you say hello in Chinese? Because of course, like every country we would go to, we would always like study before we went, like a little bit about the language, the culture, like the food, like whatever. And, about how do you say hello in Chinese? And she's like talking to me and she's telling me and like the video, like it shows, it's like weird. There's like nobody at the airport, And then as we made our way back to the States, we realized what all of that turned into. And we're like, oh my gosh, like we were there. It's like so crazy. And so we came back to the States and again, we didn't have a place to live because we're full-time travelers. Like we had our camper. And so we're like, when we saw what was happening and we're like, well, what are we going to do? Like, we're going to have to like figure out, like, we're going to have to buy like a place to live. Like we can't, not that you couldn't travel during all that mess, but it just wasn't as easy. Plus we've been well aware of the things that are, this agenda that's been going on for a very long time started to unfold. And we're like, okay, it's now time to buy our land and start our, we've always wanted to live off the grid. We've always wanted to homestead. We've always wanted, in fact, a lot of our travels, we would actually go to places and we would stay with families. We would stay with other people that were like doing what we want to do. And we would learn how they do it in different countries. And that was a big part of our travel. So we're like, all right, it's time to like take all the things that we've learned from all the places we've been and like go buy us a piece of property and like set ourselves up. And so that's kind of how we ended here. We bought 4 acres, actually about an hour from where we live now. And we thought that was going to be our place. And we're like, cause we were just scrambling to get, something. And then we realized that we needed a lot more space than that for what we were wanting to do. And so we ended up buying our 26 acres out here in the northwest part of Georgia. And now we're setting ourselves up completely, and it's a process. It's going to take probably a decade or more, but we're in the process. And I guess the process is it's a part of it, right? Yeah. It's like, it's the best part.
Right. Yeah. Right. So that's absolutely fascinating. I'm really glad that I got to travel some when I was younger, went to England, lived in England for a little while, went to Europe, went around, been to Hawaii, because the way things are looking, it doesn't seem like they're going to let us move around the Earth cabin anymore freely. Okay. So I'm really glad that I got to do that. I bet you are really glad that you got to do that before all this craziness started, and maybe you got most of that out of your system. Hopefully they will let us move around the Earth cabin again. But it's just looking pretty bleak. So 24 acres, 26 acres, you said? That's a lot. That's a lot of land to manage. That's a big undertaking. We just purchased 2.5 acres in the northwest Georgia countryside, and it's just the right amount, I think, for our little family. But it would be nice to have a little bit bigger cushion around you, with what's coming. We think's coming down the road here. So you've been in this little spot for how long?
We moved out here we purchased the land a little over a year ago, but we've been out here, like living out here full time for a little less than a year, I would say.
Okay. Well, welcome to Georgia. So, we're glad to have you here. For some reason, I thought you were in Tennessee, but you're in Georgia, so you're not too far from me. We're going to have to hang out, especially when I get out to the countryside. So you have 2 beautiful kids, 2 little girls. How old?
My oldest is 10, and my youngest is 7.
Okay. Great age. Both girls?
Yes.
So amazing.
Both girls are...
God bless you for being a mama. There's so many alternative choices for women nowadays, and although it seems like there's going to be less choice for some who may choose to not become a mother, at least in certain states where they will have restrictions on terminating pregnancies as of this morning. I don't know. Did you hear about this morning's news?
I didn't, no.
As of this morning, Roe versus Wade has been overturned.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
don't mind my rooster. He's trying to join the conversation.
Yeah, no, we're happy to include him. He's doing his job, and so that's a good thing. So I know that there's going to be some people rejoicing over that decision, and there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be very upset about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so even the things that we look at and for those who look at this as a positive thing, we also have to take it with the potential that this could be pushing us further towards that conflict that they've been trying to create between the division points that they really have been pushing for a long time, this left-right which for me, I'm independent, so I'm in the middle going, okay, can we all just get along, please? But that's the kind of world that we're living in today. We've got all these factors, pressing on us from every direction, creating all this division and strife. We got to take a quick little break, and when we come back, I want to dive into some of the things that we see that are coming down the road, some of the reasons why you maybe decided to go off-grid and opt out of the current system, because we've got a lot coming. So we'll talk about that after the break. Are we being manipulated? Is the media really telling us the truth? Can we trust the food we eat? What's actually in our medicines? Find all your answers with me, Tia Severino, on my show, The People's Truth. As an advocate for truth, health freedom, and spiritual growth, I will be digging deep into the heart of the matter, from personal freedoms, current events, and much more. My guests and I will get you thinking in ways you've never thought before through our insights and thought-provoking discussions. Tune in every other Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern on UI Media Network. Catch me live on uimedianetwork.org and on Facebook, YouTube, Spreaker, and almost all your favorite podcasting platforms. It's time to wake up. Find out what's really going on. The People's Truth, telling revolutionary truths in a time of universal deception. Welcome back to The People's Truth with Tia Severino, and we are not streaming live on Facebook today because I am on restriction. I've been a bad girl. About 2.5 years ago, I posted a meme, and it was horrifically offensive. It was in the eyes of Facebook's AI. It was promoting self-harm, and this meme was basically, it said, Hillary Clinton sent you a suicide request. Literally, that is what the meme said. And now, 2.5 years later, I've been slapped with a 30-day ban on going live. So we're not live on Facebook today. And if you have been following me on Facebook, my suggestion is that you start following me on other platforms, okay? I'm all over the place. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Truth Social, Gab. I mean, I don't post as much on those, but I am on these other platforms. And most importantly, you've got to be over on uimedianetwork.org because that is the only place that you are going to find some of the highly censored content that I've produced here at UI Media Network, like the interview that I did with Kimberly Overton of Nurse Freedom Network just a couple of weeks of, it was 4 weeks ago? Yeah, about a month ago, I did an interview with Kimberly Overton. It has been pulled down off of YouTube for medical misinformation. And this is the kind of thing that happens anytime we're telling the truth. So please go to uimedianetwork.org, sign up, make sure that you have signed up so that you can watch the Next Steps conference videos, which will be ready. I am hearing probably, possibly, hopefully, maybe next week. So you'll be able to start going back and watching those workshops. If you were an attendee, you will have a free viewing. And if you didn't get to go to the conference, you can sign up. You can either buy the whole conference, or you can buy individual workshops and watch them on a pay-per-view basis. So we're really excited about that. I'm here today with Louise Milleman. She is with Choose Conscious Water. Yes, that's the name of the company. Choose Conscious Water. She's a Kangen water distributor, representative?
Distributor, yeah.
Okay. And she was one of the gold sponsors at the Next Steps conference. I really, really love the lifestyle that you are living, Louise, and I think that it is really in line with what I want to be doing and what so many other people are just now, either becoming more serious about it. Maybe they thought about it, they wanted to do it. Now is the time. They're starting to see the world is going a little bit crazier. And so a lot of people are thinking about, like, what am I going to do if the hits the fan? And do I have enough food? Do I have enough water? Would I be able to survive if the grid went down? Like, what am I going to do if there's marauding groups of looters? I mean, literally, we do not know what is coming, but we can look at recent events to get an idea of what could happen. Just look at we just have to look to a couple summers ago with the BLM riots and looting, the disruptions that those caused in communities. I was very involved in helping with volunteering after Katrina. You saw what happened in Louisiana and New Orleans when it flooded and people, it just there's an old saying, 72 hours to animal, which basically means like if you cut off, like in a crisis situation, if you cut off food, water, and services from people in 72 hours, they're looting, killing, causing all kinds of craziness. They turn into animals. Louise, the question that is like at the top of my head right now is, okay, you've got a little spot, you've got some land, you're off grid, so you can be like completely free of the man. You don't have to pay utility bills or any of that kind of stuff. How is that working out? What's that like, being completely disconnected from the grid, not having those services? So a lot of people are out there going, I don't know if I could do that. I kind of need my electricity. How am I going to charge my cell phone? What's it really like living off grid? And what kind of problems do you face when you choose to go that route?
Oh my gosh. That's a really great question. Like there's a lot of struggles that we've had being out here. And I hear a lot of people say that to me. They're like, oh, that's like my dream. Like I want to do that. And I actually talked to quite a few people at the conference after you had introduced me at the event. When you had said I was living off grid, I had like a bunch of people come up to me at the dinner and they're like, oh my gosh, like I wanted to live off grid. And I was just telling people the truth. I'm like, listen, man, like it's rough out here sometimes. Like I literally had to come outside for this because that's my office behind me that I usually do my work in, but it's too hot right now. It's too hot. We are off the power grid 100%. So we don't rely on anything we do have internet. We have satellite internet. So I can do stuff like this. And, I still also have a business that I run from online. So we do have internet, but we don't have to rely on anyone for water. We don't have to rely on anyone for power. But it gets hard. So like, for example, we had to go through so many different setups and systems and inverters and generators to try to figure out like what works best. And there's a big difference between self-sustainability, or what should I say, self-sustaining yourself, and like sustainability. Because I really was one of those people. I was like, I want to be like super sustainable. I want to live without, live with nature and the earth and never have, but then I'm out here with like batteries and I'm out here with like generators and I'm like, this doesn't feel sustainable because it's really like not always sustainable. Like self-sustaining doesn't necessarily equal sustainability,
Right.
But we're doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can to find the balance between that. Right. So most recently, the biggest problem we had is we had a huge heat wave come through, and it literally like, we don't have enough power to like run the AC. Like we can kind of, as long as we have plenty of sun, there's not a whole lot of clouds. We are, we hold enough power that we can run the AC, but it's for like maybe 10 minutes at a time. And like, when we're talking about running the AC, we're talking about it being set at like 83. Like that's what our thermostat set at, so like, we're like, that's not AC. And I'm like, well, when it's 100 degrees outside, it feels pretty good at 83 inside. And you've got 10 minutes with like the fan running and you're just like, oh, this feels okay. This feels so good. And then it's like, it's got to go off so that we can continue to have power for the rest of the day, And so I feel like there's like a mindset to happen. And it's like, you have to just kind of like start getting used to like not having all of the conveniences that you would normally get used to having, I was telling somebody at your event, actually, they were like, well, what kind of things do you have to get rid of? I'm like, you just have to change your mindset to know, like, yes, we have a cell phone and I do use my cell phone, but I have to charge it. I just have to be really mindful of charging it during the day. Like I don't charge anything at night because we don't have the sun at night. And that's really what we rely on for our power. We are storing in a battery, but like we want to use the most, if I ever want to use like a crock pot, like I know someone was like giving me recipes for like an air fryer. I was like, oh, that's cute. Like I would never be able to run an air fryer out here, like at all. Like there's no way we have enough power being like an air fryer. I can get my Vitamix to run, which was like a big accomplishment, but again, it's like we have to do it like the middle of the day and it has to be like certain times. So you have to time things out to where you're just being smart about, and you have to learn a little bit about creating your own power. Like, what does that even mean? What does it mean to be like AC or DC, direct current and alternating current, and what kind of like energy waves that we use and what pushes what? And like, there's all this stuff that like I had no idea about. And good old YouTube, we got to learn a lot of stuff just by watching videos and stuff. But another issue that we ran into with the heat wave is the water. So like we rely on our pond. So we have a pond, and we actually have a pretty cool setup. So our property has like 3 different levels, if you will. It kind of is like hilly. And at the bottom, we have our garden. We have a huge garden space. We're growing a ton of food. We have a huge pasture for cows that are like 10 acres. And we have like our orchard across the creek. Well, our creek which has a lot of water for the most part. Like we've only been out here we've only owned the land for like a year. So we're still learning the land, right? And we got out here, we saw the water and we're like, there's so much water here. It's going to be awesome. Like that was one of the biggest requirements. We're like, as long as our property has water, like we'll be able to make anything work. We just need to make sure we have water. And we did, until one day we didn't. And we were like, we're out of water. And that was a huge deal because the way that we get water right now to our camper. And so this is something that I don't think I even said to anyone, but we're getting ready to build a house, but we're going to be building it out of hemp, and we're going to be using hempcrete, which is like, we could do a whole nother, day on talking about alternative building materials and hempcrete and why and how and, all the stuff. But like in the meantime, while we're getting everything set up for that, we're living in our camper. And so the way that we get water is we go down to our creek and we have this big 55-gallon drum, and we actually pump with a pump, water from the creek into our 55-gallon drum. Then we have to pick it up with a tractor. We have to lift it, and then we drive it so where it sits higher than our camper. And then we can gravity feed with the hose, the water into our camper. And then we usually make that 55 gallons last us about a week or so. Most people go through 55 gallons of water in a day if you live in like a regular house, so like that in itself is like, you have to be careful with what you consume. And I like that you chose to call this Choose Conscious Living, especially because our business that when we sponsored is Choose Conscious Water, but it's really all about the conscious choices you make. And like, just not letting the water run whenever, like you only use the water that you need, you reuse water over and over again. Like there's just all this different stuff that you have to think about. But yeah, we ran into an issue because our pond, our pond, I was telling you, that sits behind us is at the second level of the property. So our garden's at the bottom level. The pond kind of sits a little bit elevated from it. And when we bought the property, there was a broken bank on the pond, and we're like, let's build that up. But we put a pipe going through it. So you can actually just turn the lever on our pipe, and then we could gravity irrigate our garden from the pond. So the pond, because it sits higher, you got to love gravity, right? Like all this stuff is all like gravity. We don't need power when you have the force behind you of gravity. Right. So you can just turn a little nozzle, and then the water gets fed from the pond, and that waters our garden. So we're like, we're good. We've got this big pond. It's got tons of water. We've got this creek. It's got tons of water. And then like it went dry for like weeks on end with like no rain, and it was super hot. And the next thing you know, the pond had like no water, and our garden started to die. Yeah. And we went down to the creek, and we're like, the cows that drink from the creek, because we don't have water for the cows, they just walk down to the creek, and it started drying up, and we're like, we're all going to die. We have no water. So it's like you run into these problems where it's like you are completely reliant only on your own, like coming up with your own solutions, And so thankfully we were able to, we got this big 330 gallon IBC tote, and we went and we actually filled up with water somewhere else, and we brought it to the property, and we now have it elevated above our garden. So if we do run out of pond water, we have a backup. And so we kind of came up with that, but it's like, you don't really know what you're going to face until you start facing it. And then you have to figure it out as you go. So you just have to live a life that's simple and slow enough to be able to handle some of the obstacles, because lots of these times when you're trying to figure out these obstacles, I mean, it's like water is life. If you didn't have water, like what would you do? So you have to make sure that you're giving yourself the time and space to be able to figure out all the obstacles. We're still learning our land. I feel like once we know our land a little bit better too, we'll be more prepared. But there's a lot of things that people don't think about, and it does get really rough in times. I think that a lot of people come out here for like, a weekend, and they're like, oh wow, this is like fun for like a weekend. But I'm like, no, this is like our life. Like it's like, it would be like you living like if you're like camping all the time, but it's to me, I feel like it's kind of sort of what we need as a society, is to kind of go take a step back in life in order for us to be able to protect our future. I really, truly feel like we have to take a step back. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to take a step back and like, not just learn ourselves, but also teach our children all of these like forgotten ways of the past that like we now as almost 40-year-olds, we're like scrambling around trying to learn how to, it's like we're trying to learn how to provide for ourselves, and how to, we've been growing food for years. Before we started traveling, we were, avid gardeners and stuff. So it's like we kind of have the skills. But that's another thing. Growing food and having a garden is like, that's a good first step. But like, if you really want to be self-sufficient and provide for your family, you have to learn more than just grow food. You have to learn how to make that food last for an entire year. You have to make sure that you can actually grow the food to where it's not all going to be ripe at the same time. Canning, preserving, fermenting, like drying your herb. Like there's all this stuff that goes into it. We all just take advantage of the fact that we want to get a dried herb. You just go to the store. Well, like what if you just couldn't go to the store?
Exactly.
Right? What if, and even if and it's not even like, what if you can't go to the store, but it's like the fact that they're trying to, the ultimate goal, I don't even, nobody really knows what the ultimate goal is. I don't believe, I think we all have our different versions of what we think, but there is an agenda there. And I do believe that it's ultimate control. Like people, they don't want people like us just being able to go into the grocery store. There will be a time where we're going to have to get to the point where we're going to have to either learn how to grow it yourself or be really truly connected with the people around you that are doing that, Absolutely. So if I feel like
we got to take a break. I don't want to interrupt you, but I do got to take a break, and we are going to pick this up right where we left off on the other side of the break, because this is a great conversation, and we're going to go a little bit more into the problems, kind of what we think is coming after the break. Okay.
If this content resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel at uimedianetwork.org to stay updated with our uncensored shows. Also, like and follow us at UI Media Network on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and almost all your favorite podcasting platforms. Most importantly, if you're being censored on social media, write to us at contact@uimedianetwork.org to get your message out. And remember, keep raising that frequency.
Welcome back to The People's Truth. My guest today is Louise Milleman with Choose Conscious Water. We're talking about choosing conscious living, what that looks like, what it's really like when you're doing it, because it looks great on paper or on video, but then you get out there and it may be a little different. But I mean, I think that you're hitting all the same points that were the reason why I did the Next Steps conference, because we've got to build the parallel society. We have to go back to living the way we have for thousands of years on this planet. And that is in small communities where we're taking care of each other and we're taking care of the land, and we're growing our own food and we're teaching our own kids and we're healing each other. All of these things that go together. But there is definitely, I think, a much higher level of awareness and understanding among a lot more people now that we need to do this. But like you said, everybody's kind of all the way from a vague feeling that something isn't right and it doesn't seem to be getting better to full-blown, OCD prepperville, like, stacking food, 25 years worth of food and that kind of stuff. Most people, I think, are somewhere in between mildly concerned and completely terrified with the direction that the world is going in. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, we are hearing about, supply chain issues, truckers that may just decide not to deliver goods. Inflation by itself can create a situation where people are priced out of the market, in the sense of like small farmers can't keep up. They can't keep up, right? So what do you see as the biggest, let's just say, to keep it from going all over the place, pick your top 3 things that you are concerned about happening, that you think may be happening now, may be happening in the near future. The top 3 things that concern you to the point where you're out in the middle of nowhere in a big chunk of land and just completely disconnecting, not completely disconnecting from society, but living this kind of a lifestyle.
Yeah, I would say that my biggest concerns that's a hard question. There's a lot of concerns.
I know, that's why you got to hone it down though, because it can make people lose their minds. I don't like to stress people out too much. So let's just keep it to the top 3.
Yeah, totally. Okay. I would say the food supply is definitely at one of the topper. I don't know if that's a word, the top of the list. Or I don't know if it's a top, but it's one of the top, right? It's probably one of the higher concerns. We see what's going on right now. And it's, to me, I hate to come from a place of fear. I had a lot of people when we first came out, even when we lived in California, when we left, and it was like right after SB 277, and people are like, oh, you can't run from anything. I'm like, I'm not running from something. I'm running to something, right? I don't like to think of like, I'm scared of the California government. I'm running from them. I'm like, no, I'm running to a place that I see where it's more free, And so I feel like the food thing is a little bit, it can cause fear. It can cause anxiety, but like, as long as we know that like, we have solutions at our fingertips, then we don't really have to freak out so much, and just know that there are small things that we can do and that can make big changes. But yeah, I would definitely say the food supply. I would say the schooling and the indoctrination that's going on with our children. I think the absolute, when people say like, hey, Louise, like, I can't go live off grid right now. I can't do all the things you're doing. But I really want to I want to start somewhere. And I'm like, get your kids out of school, get your kids out of school. Like you have, and I understand that it's not possible for everybody because they have to work, or they have, maybe they're on one income, or, for different reasons, like people have different situations. But I'm like, listen, like that is probably one of the most, like our future generation is being so indoctrinated right now. It is unbelievable what is going on, like in the world with our children, with schools. And so I would say that that's a really big thing. And so that would probably be at the, one of the top of the lists as well. And then I would say, the medical freedom aspect of everything, and just being able to keep your, bodily autonomy intact, and make sure that you are able. And I think that that's the thing, is that it's not that they're forcing anybody to do anything, but they will slowly start taking your ability to be able to, go to work. If you don't, you can't work if you don't get your shot, or, you can't do this if you don't, you can't go to, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what's coming.
You won't be able to go to a concert. You won't be able to go to the grocery store. I mean, they literally want to, they don't want to segregate us, because the idea of segregation would imply that the segregated class would be left alone to have their own set. There would, if it was true segregation, there would be hours for the jab versus the unjab, right? So if you're unjabbed, you can only go between 9 and 11 o'clock at night after everybody else has gone, done their shopping, and they got to come in and disinfect the whole place. Or the kids whose parents decide not to get the, immune compromising injections, because I don't even like to use the word anymore, because first of all, the censors, second of all, they aren't what they say they are. They don't help fight anything. Okay. But you would think if it was segregated, like you think of, when I think of segregation, I think of blacks only schools and whites only schools, and black, colored water fountains and white water fountains, and different entrances and that kind of stuff. That's not happening here. They're not giving us our own schools, our own grocery stores, our own hours, our own water fountains. No, first of all, they cut the water fountains off for everybody. They shut down schools for everybody. They don't want us to have our own schools. They want us to not be able to participate in society at all unless we comply. And that's frightening. But it is. And you talked about the indoctrination of our kids in school. Like, we are literally going to lose, I think, our ability to continue as humans on this planet, which may be what these elites want, because you hear that they're pushing for this transhumanism thing. They really want to do away with the traditional family. They want to do away with religion. They want to do, spirituality, anything that makes us care about each other. Okay?
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I always am telling people is I don't call them schools, by the way. And you're welcome to borrow this from me if you choose. I call them state-sponsored indoctrination camps, because that's what they are.
That's what they are. Yep, totally. Yeah, I think that is so important for people to understand exactly what you just said, because it is exactly what it is. It's an indoctrination camp.
Yep.
And it's working. like you look at, I mean, it's absolutely working, you know, and that's the scary part is like, you know, sometimes you look around and I surround myself, and I'm sure you do too as well, Tia, like your little circle of your own friends. And you're like, no one's buying into this. Like, there's no way, like, because most of the people that I know are like, this is crazy, you know, but then I go out and I look into the world and I'm like, there's a lot of people that are like, there's a lot of people that are like standing up for this and like agreeing with like what the government's doing. My own brother being one of them, like my own brother, like I look at him and he, you know, went to college and he got his master's degree and he got all this stuff, you know, but he got indoctrinated so bad. Like, I can't even believe some of the things I hear come out of his mouth. I mean, like literally. Yeah. And I'm just like, so yeah, I mean, I think it starts, anybody can homeschool or unschool, or like if there's a financial, reason why you have to go to work so you can't, like if you can even just find a friend, find a co-op group. I mean, like find something like that's probably one of the biggest things that you can do, because our kids are the ones that are going to have to come up and, you know, when they get to be our age, they're going to have to step in and make the changes that we're leading the way for that. But they have to be the ones to come in and continue on the path of what we're doing. And they're trying to make them not do that, right? They're trying to make it to where these kids are going to turn against their own parents and be like, you guys are crazy. And I see it happening. I mean, I have friends that are like hardcore medical freedom activists, and they have kids that are in high school that went to the public high school system, and they're literally fighting their parents because they want to get the thing. And their parents like, you can't do it. You don't understand. And they're like coming to me and they're like, Louise, like, this is my daughter. Like, she hates me because I won't give her the thing that everyone else at school is getting. And they isolate her. It's insane. And it's like, they're turning these children against their own parents.
It's by design. And it's been going on for a long time. And in fact, when you get a chance, I encourage you to go on YouTube and put in the search term, Aaron Russo feminism. Okay? Aaron, Aaron, Russo, Russo, feminism. And what you will find is you will find a clip from an interview, and actually he was being interviewed by Alex Jones, where he is talking about his friendship with Nick Rockefeller and how one night he was hanging out with Nick. Now Aaron Russo was not a television, but a movie producer. Okay. And pretty successful in Hollywood. And so he had become friends with Nick Rockefeller. And one night he was sitting there talking to him, and Nick said, Aaron, what do you think the women's lib movement was about? And Aaron replied, because at the time he thought it was a noble cause, you know, women getting the right to vote, equal pay with men. So he thought it was a noble cause. And Nick laughed at him and said, you're an idiot. And he's like, what do you mean? He said, well, let me tell you what that was about. We, the Rockefellers, we funded women's lib. And the reason was, there was two reasons. One was that at the time, only men were working. And so they could only tax half of the population. So by convincing women that they needed to pursue careers like men, they could get the women out of the household into the work field where they could be taxed. The other reason was by getting the women out of the household, they could begin to basically break down the family, okay? They could get the kids into school at a younger age. Like, the younger you get a kid, the better your chances are of being able to fully indoctrinate them. So they wanted to get the kids into the school system as soon as they could in order to start indoctrinating them to look at the state as the authority instead of the parents. And now we are, and by the way, Aaron Russo was murdered, and we are where we are now. So whenever I hear anyone speaking about feminism, I'm like, hold on a second. You need to go look at that, because it hasn't done anything good for any women, for me or for any women that I know. And the men are getting shafted too. It's a full-on war on women and men. Right. Okay. So we're going to take our final break. When we come back, we're going to dive really deeply into solutions, because I know that everybody out there, after getting kind of stressed out by the stuff we're talking about, is going to be wanting to know some solutions. And I know you've got some for them. So when we come back, we'll talk about those.
The time to defy the modern agenda is now. UI Media Network. presents Frequency Wars, an explosive new series that examines contentious subject matter pursuing us beyond our five senses. This weekly series discovers the intricacies of imposing issues that challenge our daily existence and question humanity. Provocative and intriguing, we confront the issues and conflicts affecting us on a global scale. Manipulation, manpower, or others simply controlling your mentality. The commentary and guests will shift our paradigm and defy the status quo.
In 1979, the so-called father of Israeli intelligence, a guy called Issa Harel, told an American journalist that there was going to be an Islamic attack on New York's biggest building.
Bill Gates, he is publicly saying we should consider microchipping all of humanity so we can track their vaccination status.
What you see in movies like The Avengers, that's actually true.
What will you believe? Frequency Wars challenges perception to take back your sovereignty. The power and purpose are greater than any of us, but we will test it all. Frequency Wars, the next revolution.
Thanks for sticking around to watch this episode of The People's Truth with Tia Severino. If you're enjoying this content, you'll want to head over to uimedianetwork.org. Make sure that you're signed up and that you share this content out with your friends, family, and wider social media following. We really, really need your help. We're constantly getting censored. Stuff is getting taken off of both YouTube and Facebook. Every time I do a show, am warning you that I'm probably not going to be on Facebook for much longer. You've got to go to uimedianetwork.org. Make sure you're signed up. Get ready to watch the Next Steps Conference workshop replays when they come out, probably next week. And all I can say is we really need your help. I'm telling you, the more truth I tell, the more a target is over my back for complete deplatforming from all social media. So UI Media Network, you can find all of the censored episodes, the ones that have been pulled off of Facebook and YouTube. Go back. There's over 2 years worth of content. We'd love to have you get caught up with the stuff that we're doing. We're here today with Louise Milleman, Choose Conscious Water, Kingdom Water distributor. She's living off-grid somewhere in an undisclosed location in Northwest Georgia, living the good life with all of the benefits and drawbacks that come with going off-grid and trying to live a self-sustainable lifestyle. So you've been doing it for a little while now. Let's get into some of those solutions. Now, not everybody's going to be able to go buy land, right? Not everybody's going to be able to get, 20 plus acres out in the country somewhere and have the ability, the skill, the willingness, the substance of character to do what it takes to live this way. But you start where you're at, right? You start where you're at. You need to start storing food. You don't have a huge budget to go buy 25 years worth of food for every member of your family right now. When you go to the grocery store, buy extra of whatever is on sale that you normally eat. That's what I'm doing. I just buy extra of what we normally eat. I'm not buying a bunch of long-term storage foods because to me, it's like if we're not going to eat it, we're not going to eat it, and I don't want to, if it came down to a situation where literally society's collapsing, a few tubs of 25-year food, I just don't see how that's going to be the end-all solution. So when the pandemic started, I started with some seeds and some dirt, okay? And the first year was I coined the term micro-harvest. Micro-harvest is a harvest that's so small. Like each member gets like 2 green beans and a tomato. That's what the first year looked like. The second year we bought land and I started growing, and there's so many things that you have to learn. So there's some learning curve. So let's talk about some of the solutions to take someone from maybe where they're at to somewhere along the path to where you're at right now.
Right. I would say exactly what you were talking about. Like you start where you're at, right? And like not everyone has land, not everyone's can do, but like you do have to start somewhere. Like there's definitely a process for us getting out to where we are. This is not the first time we've lived off grid. We actually went, my husband used to be in the military actually. And when he got out, the very first place that we went, we actually bought land in South America, and we lived in Chile for like 8 months, and we actually started doing off grid living there. And it was the very first time we ever completely lived off of solar and started homesteading, and we did that for like 8 months. And then we like realized we were still in love with all the places we'd never been, and we wanted to travel more. So we kept going. But like you start small, you start where you are, you start with a small garden, and your garden gets bigger. And yes, your first one is going to be a micro harvest, and you're going to get 2 green beans, and you're going to be like, what is this?
But I grew these
and it's all
beans.
Yes, but it is like every little micro harvest is still a big thing in the overall journey of like being able to be self-sufficient, because you had to have that micro harvest so that you could have the bigger harvest, so you could learn what you did right and what you did wrong. Exactly. Yeah, you have to learn, and then there's just so many things. So it's like starting where you are, just start where you are and do something. Like I have so many friends, like a lot of my friends that are just well aware of what's going on in the world. And like, as soon as this, the food shortages started coming up, and it was like, they were still plugged into the system so much that they were like, I went to the store the other day and there was like no bread, and they're like freaking out. And I'm like, listen, stop complaining about the fact there's no bread and go get yourself a sourdough starter and make your own bread. Like come up with a solution, because there always is going to be a solution. You have to look for it, and you have to. And you were saying like not everyone will have the willingness. And I think that's what's going to take. It's going to take who is willing to set themselves up in such a way. It can happen in small, sections if it needs to happen in small sections. But I love what you were saying about the feminism. And I didn't know that, but that's really interesting. But I do know that back when they started, taking people away, like, because we're in the middle of setting up our PMA. It's going to be Forgotten Ways PMA. We're actually in the process of setting it up right now. When we decided on that name, because we feel like everything, it's all about the forgotten ways. It's all about like needing to get back to that. And, what you were saying, it's kind of like where they started taking the women out of the home. But like, even if you go back further, all the families used to stay together all the time before the men were even taken out of the home. I mean, it used to be the men and the women and the kids, and they all worked on the farm together, and they all lived off the land, and they all, maybe the women were doing the canning and the fermenting in the kitchen, the cooking, and the husbands were out doing like the harder work on the farm or whatever. But there was still like the family was together. And then at some point, I think people started thinking that like, oh, well, if you go out and make money, then money can just buy you everything you need. So then the men left the home, and then it was like the women and the kids. And then eventually the feminism thing came in, and then the women were like, well, we're going to leave the home too. And then it was like, then at that point we started sending our kids off to be raised by somebody else and to be indoctrinated. And it's like, I want to be the one to share and enrich my children with the knowledge that I have, even if I'm just learning it with them. Because a lot of the stuff out here, when as an unschooler, I'm learning right along with them, right? Like I'm just kind of like, we're going through the processes, and the kids are like asking me questions, and I'm like, that's a really great question. I don't have the answer to that, but let me go ahead and find out with you. So we can learn together. And that's another tip I have for people is like, get books. Don't rely on the internet, because at some point you might not have it. And if you have to Google something, you don't have the knowledge. That means it's not there. So get the books as well. I'm not saying don't use the internet, because I use the internet for everything. But if you have to get on it, whether it's DuckDuckGo, which we don't use that anymore either, they're all tainted, right? But like, if you're having, it's so hard to even know, but if you're having to look something up, you don't have the knowledge. And if at some point you can't just look up how to can cucumbers, you're going to need to have a canning book, right? So get the hard copies too, and have them aside for you along with your storage of food and all the stuff that you're doing. So at some point, if you ever need to, find the knowledge and you don't have access to the internet, you still have a way to access that. But yeah, I mean, like we have to be the one to learn and be willing to take the next first steps, even if you're only getting 2 green beans, because those 2 green beans are going to lead you into the next year, which then maybe you'll get 8 green beans, and still it's going to be a micro harvest, but like it's going to be more than it was the last year. And it's like, I don't know what the timeline is for where we really fully need to be set up for ourselves, but I know that like I want my kids to be learning everything that they possibly can now. So when the time comes where we feel like, okay, like this is it. Like, I don't know if there's ever going to be this like big moment. I think that all these small moments are the thing. Like, I don't know if there's this huge thing. Like, this is the thing. Like, we're in the thing right now. But I think that our culture is so broken with the idea that, even a man has to leave his home, or a woman has to leave his home, or anybody has to leave their home. Like if you can set yourself up with a life to where the man and the woman can be there, and you're literally, it all starts at home, because you don't have to break your family up at all. You literally can learn how to live off the land. And if we want our future generation to be doing that as well, then it has to start with us. And so I think that it's just raising up the next generation and knowing that, like, just because our culture is broken doesn't mean it can't be fixed. Actually, anything that's broken can be fixed. Yeah. It's just going to take, some people say, oh, it just takes time. And I'm like, yeah, it takes time, but it also takes intention. That's right. I love that you called this. Yes, because I love that you called this choose conscious living, because that's kind of what it is. It's the intention to consciously live. Yeah, it's the choice. And it's really having to consciously choose to go back and remember the forgotten ways, or to learn the forgotten ways, so that when your kids become your age, they don't have to scramble around for the skills that we now need to scramble around for. They already have them because they learned them with you while you were learning them too, right. But you all were learning it together, But yeah, so I think it's just kind of what you said. Get that micro harvest. That's the first step. It's the first step to doing everything, is starting small, starting where you are. If you don't have the ability, I know lots of people that are finding, going in with other people, finding a Freedom Cells group that's close to you. I don't know who's familiar with the term agorism, but if you find like an agorist group that's around you, I would plug into that immediately. And just build out that parallel society that we all need to, I always say,
define the
we
term.
are. Agorism is just, I don't really know the definition of it, but it's just more of like, it's kind of like a Freedom Cells. It's like you're building out, it's everybody, like our agorist group. We're all getting together. We're trading our services, our goods, we're getting ready. We're putting pigs. We're getting 6 pigs next week in our forest. And my husband's actually back there right now building the fence. And we have friends that are coming over to help us build the fence. And then they don't have land yet. So like, we're going to let them raise 1 or 2 pigs on our property because they're helping us build the fence. And so we're all kind of trading with each other. Like, you're going to come help us do this, and we're going to help you, we're going to let you use our land. And that's just one example. I mean, we do all kinds of stuff with our community, but you plug into this group and everybody's on the same page, and we all have the same desires and goals. We're not the exact same, but we're all awake and aware of what's going on. And what we really want is just to live freely. And so we help each other be able to do that. So we don't need to rely on an outside system. We can just rely on our small little system that we've created, but it's all with people from different skills and different, everyone brings something different to the table. A lot of people say, oh, community living, like, are you gonna have a community? And I'm like, ooh, I don't like the idea of community living, because I've done it before. And there's a lot of issues with that as well.
Some of the people in the community. So I looked up, I looked up the definition of agorism. It says agorism is a social philosophy that advocates creating a society in which all relations between people are voluntary exchanges by means of counter-economics engaging with aspects of nonviolent revolution. I'm in. Right? I'm in. 100%. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I didn't know that there was that term that describes exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, we need that. We need to come together. Yep. We don't necessarily have to be like living in a commune where we're socially bound to non-familial members of the community. I like the idea of little pods within a greater structure where we're, cooperating with neighbors and the people that are close to us. Right. Because you think about it, if you're all alone as a little island, right, and you're living this way, but all around you are hostile people, and by hostile, I mean people who have a completely different mindset, are wanting to live a completely different way, don't have the same moral, social values that you do, and then there's an outside force that comes in, you don't know who around you can count on to help. But if everyone around you is kind of has a similar mindset and you are working together, then you have a bigger buffer around you when those outside forces come in. And I think that that's kind of what Tim Ray here, United, what was it called? UI Neighborhood Watch or something like that? Yeah. UI Neighborhood. So he is working on an idea where communities come together, people in communities would come together and pledge to each other to support each other in the event of tyrannical government overreach and be there to kind of have each other's back. So these are the kind of things that more and more people are thinking about and going and moving towards. And all I can say is I hope that they will allow us to self-segregate and live, okay? Because it's very clear to me that I cannot live, nor do I want my family to live in the world, their structure. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. My concern is, are they going to let us go off grid, grow food, homeschool, homeschool our kids, and they're not going to come in and try and force that societal norm upon us. I don't know. I guess that book has still yet to be written. Speaking of books, and I agree we should be getting hard copies of any books that have knowledge in that you want to make sure that you have for your generation, for generations to come. I told you this was going to go too fast, didn't I? Did I tell you it was going to fly by? I mean, the hour is up. I want to get one little last thing in here before we say goodbye, and that is that next late winter, early spring, we're going to do another Next Steps conference. One of the workshops that I am planning to do is going to be a homesteading. So I'm going to have a homesteading and a homeschooling workshop. So those are two of the workshops that will be in the next one, where I want to bring people like yourself and maybe some others to help people in a more in-depth way to figure out how they can do some of the things that you're doing. Tell people how they can find you. We didn't even talk about Kingdom Water. Give people your website, your social media, so everyone can go check out what you're doing and get some conscious, structured living water from you.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Tia. Yeah. If you guys, if you want to find me, you can find me on Instagram at Our Big Rad Life. That was like back when we used to travel. We never changed our name. OUR.
Yeah. I was going to say, spell it.
OUR is Our Big, BIG, Rad, RAD Life. That's on Instagram. Choose.conscious.water is the business one if you want to learn about living structured Kangen water. And then Facebook, you can find me on just Louise Milleman. You can follow, or you can even add me. That's what I do, is just post about homesteading, water, structured water, and off-grid living. And I talk, and unschooling. I talk a lot about unschooling as well. So if anyone's interested in learning about that,
wonderful.
I deep dive into unschooling a lot. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't understand fully. And if they could just understand it, I think more people would do it. So
awesome. So go
this
check
has been
Louise
so fun.
out. Go check Louise out. Follow her, friend her, get some information about Kangen water from her. Learn from her and connect, and maybe even teach her. Maybe you have some knowledge that can help her with what she's doing. That's what we're all about here at The People's Truth. We love you, Louise. Can't wait to see you again soon. And for everybody else that's out there, stick around. In 2 more weeks, we're going to have another episode of The People's Truth with Tia Severino. See you then.
Whoa. My mind has officially been blown wide open. Is yours? Keep sharing the show and join us in our mission to educate the world with uncensored truth. As they say, together we are stronger, our voices louder, and the synergy of our actions more powerful. If you have any comments or questions for Tia and her guests, send us an email at contact@uimedianetwork.org. Until then, stay safe, stay tuned. The UI Media Network and its associates take no responsibility for the opinions and statements made by the talk show hosts or their guests.